A beef between two titans of the New York music scene hits the sex trafficking and racketeering trial of Sean Diddy Combs. Why 50 Cent was brought up this week during emotional witness testimony. Combs and 50, they've been at odds for a long time. And now, one of them's facing the possibility of spending the rest of their life in federal prison, and the other is not holding back or hiding the apparent joy they find in that possibility happening with a guilty verdict.
No one saw it coming. When 50 Cent walked into the courtroom, most expected another headline-grabbing moment. Maybe a jab, maybe a smirk. After all, his long-running feud with Diddy had mostly played out online, filled with sarcasm and memes. But this time was different. The moment he approached the witness stand, the room fell silent. Gone was the usual swagger. As he raised his right hand and took the oath, the entire mood shifted. This wasn't about social media banter anymore. It wasn't about old rivalries or entertainment value. This was serious. What 50 Cent revealed under oath wasn't gossip. It was first-hand knowledge. Testimony that stunned the courtroom and left both legal teams scrambling. The kind of statement that doesn't just stir public opinion. It has the potential to change the direction of an entire case.
Combs and 50 Cent. These two go back a long time. They have been rivals for a long time. And this week we learned that, at least from Diddy's side of things, this feud apparently went far beyond words. 50 Cent's name came up during the testimony this week of Capricorn Clark. She is a former assistant of Sean Combs who went on to become the head of marketing for his Sean John clothing brand. Clark rose successfully and professionally through the ranks of Diddy's world during her time working for him, which stretched between 2004 to 2018, so she saw a lot. Clark claimed that Diddy would threaten her, and she says he even kidnapped her in 2011. All of this matters as we build up to how 50 Cent kind of factors into what she said on the stand. Now, Capricorn Clark started working for Bad Boy after she worked for Death Row Records. Now, that's surprising, since Death Row was ran by perhaps Diddy's most hated enemy, Suge Knight. Clark said that one of her good friends had a baby with Suge Knight, and that's how she knew him. And in perhaps the most shocking story from her testimony, Clark claimed that shortly after she started working for Diddy, Diddy and his security guards took her to Central Park after dark, and Diddy said, quote, "He told me he didn't know that I had anything to do with Suge Knight, and if anything happened, he would have to kill me." It is an allegation that paints Combs as someone who is ready to take a life. But as Capricorn Clark's testimony continued, she brought up another rival of Sean Diddy Combs and another allegation that he made an ominous threat of violence. Clark testified, when working for Diddy, they went to a press event at MTV and 50 Cent was there. And just wait until you hear what she says Diddy told 50's manager. 50 Cent's real name is Curtis Jackson. He rose to fame in the early 2000s. You might remember songs like In the Club. You might remember that he was the leader of the rap group G-Unit. Now, 50 grew up in Jamaica, Queens, New York. Diddy, also a New York native. He was born in Harlem, grew up in Mount Vernon, New York, just about 20 miles away. And even though they both had success in music, they both rose to fame representing the city of New York and the rap scene there, they have been longtime rivals. In 2006, 50 Cent released a diss track about Diddy. So almost 20 years ago, this goes back a long way. And in that diss track, he says, quote, "Who shot Biggie Smalls? We don't get 'em. They gon' kill us all. Man, Puffy know who hit that expletive. Man, that expletive soft." Now, 50 is accusing Combs there of knowing who killed his friend, the notorious B.I.G. Christopher Wallace. Wallace and Puffy were incredibly close, but Wallace was shot and killed in a drive-by shooting in Los Angeles in 1997, and no one has ever been charged for pulling the trigger. This all happened during really the height of the East Coast-West Coast rap rivalry of the 90s, which involved Suge Knight, who we mentioned earlier. 50 Cent has also accused Diddy of orchestrating the murder of death row rapper Tupac Shakur, who died in 1996.
What followed took the entire courtroom by surprise, especially Diddy. The moment 50 Cent began speaking, the atmosphere changed. There was no performance, no sharp remarks, just a steady, serious tone that immediately commanded attention. "I've known Sean for a long time," he began, his voice even and deliberate. "Longer than most people in this room. I've seen the public persona and I've seen what's behind it." The room went still. No raised voice. No theatrics. But somehow, his calm delivery hit harder than any outburst could have. 50 explained that he had no intention of ever being part of this trial. For years, he stayed out of it, even when, in his own words, there were more than enough reasons to speak up. But as the accusations grew and new reports kept surfacing, he said staying silent no longer felt right. This wasn't about music beefs or headline drama anymore. He told the court he had heard things, seen things firsthand. And according to him, those details revealed a side of Diddy the public had never been allowed to see. A version that, in his words, changes the way you look at everything.
He was arrested in September 2023, and he is the only person facing charges related to Tupac's murder. But 50 Cent has continued to push the allegation that Sean Combs either knows something or did something for Tupac to end up dead, though Diddy has denied that. But in a 2023 Instagram post, 50 wrote, "Damn, so Pac got lined by brother love, LOL, time to lawyer up, expletive, might get sticky," with a pic of Suge Knight in a car with Tupac. Diddy, who has a lot of names, Puff Daddy, Puffy, Puff, and brother love is one of those other names. Now, from Diddy's side of things, again, he's denied having anything to do with Tupac's murder, and he's also denied having anything to do with Christopher Wallace's death, and he's denied publicly having issues with 50 Cent. Here's what Combs said when he was asked about a beef with 50 in a 2018 interview with the radio show The Breakfast Club, Power 105.1 FM.
Hey, yo, I don't have no beef with
I don't know why.
With Fifth. He loves me. He loves me.
Do y'all really
can't
have
see
a
it?
beef?
I mean, y'all can't see it.
No, we can't see
Y'all
it,
can't
man.
see that he loves me?
But see,
you really think that's hate?
If you look at 50's social media, you can see he has a lot of posts about Diddy. And this is what he posted the day that federal agents in Miami raided Combs' mansion ahead of his arrest on the charges that he's now on trial for. 50 Cent posted on X, "Now it's not Diddy do it, it's Diddy done. They don't come like that unless they got a case." 50 Cent also included a link to his G-Unit clothing brand in that post. While Diddy in the Breakfast Club clip said that 50 Cent actually loves him and there was never a beef, on the stand this week, Capricorn Clark said otherwise. Clark said that she was at this press event at MTV with Diddy and 50 Cent was also there, all of this happening in New York. Clark said, quote, "After the interview wrapped up, myself, Puff, and Chris Lighty got in the elevator." Clark said that Lighty was an entertainment manager who, on paper, was managing Diddy at the time, but was also 50 Cent's manager at the time. Prosecutors asked Clark what happened in the elevator, and she said, quote, "Puff told Chris, because they were having some sort of issue, like, I really don't like all the back and forth. I don't do that. I like guns." The prosecutor then asked, "What's the issue with an individual?" And Clark responded, he had an issue with 50 Cent. She said Combs was very serious when he said that. In this case, it has become common to hear testimony from witnesses about alleged threats by Diddy. In fact, several witnesses have said that Diddy regularly threatened to fire people, to beat people, like his former girlfriend Cassie Ventura, and in this case, making a threat involving firearms to settle a dispute per the testimony of someone who was one of his closest associates for more than a decade. Invoking gun violence and some sort of veiled threat, that could be scary for some, but apparently not.
50 Cent didn't mention the flashy parties fans saw on Instagram or the red carpet after parties covered by tabloids. Instead, he described something far more hidden, gatherings that happened out of view, where no cameras were allowed and guests were required to surrender their phones at the door. These weren't just exclusive events for the elite. According to 50, they were controlled environments, spaces where the usual boundaries faded, and influence was used in ways that felt deeply unsettling. He told the court that behind the luxury and status, there was something darker at play. These private parties, he claimed, weren't about fun, they were about control. The energy was off, he said. It felt more like a test than a celebration. And he didn't mince words. He described the atmosphere as manipulative, where people were pushed past their comfort zones, and those who resisted were quietly cut out. According to him, Diddy created a culture where silence was expected and compliance was rewarded. Then came a moment that left the entire courtroom still. Years ago, 50 recalled, after a major music awards show, he was invited to a closed-door after-party hosted in a private suite. On the surface, it looked like every other elite industry event, Bottles popping, celebrities mingling. But the vibe was different. Several guests, he said, seemed tense, more like they were trying to blend and then enjoy themselves. Trusting his instincts, he left early. But what followed stuck with him for years. The next morning, he received a phone call from someone who had stayed. Their voice, he said, was shaken. They described scenes that were hard to process, people being pressured into situations they hadn't agreed to, and a host who used power as leverage. That call, 50 told the court, changed everything. It wasn't just a party.
It was a warning sign, he said.
And it wasn't the last one. He went on to say that after that night, he started paying closer attention to whispers, to sudden exits, to careers that ended without explanation. It was always quiet, he added. Too quiet. Over time, he said, patterns began to emerge. Stories that sounded too similar to be coincidence. Former employees leaving without notice. Artists falling out of the spotlight overnight. You start to connect the dots, he said. And you realize, maybe they weren't just stories after all.
Posted right after his name came up in the courtroom, quote, cut, wait a minute. Puffy's got a gun? I can't believe this. I don't feel safe, with a picture that looked like an AI image of 50 Cent on a movie set looking serious. And he wasn't done. Shortly after that, he posted another AI image on Instagram of him in a Yankees hat with a very scared look on his face with the caption, "Oh my goodness, itty bitty Diddy wants me dead. I have to lay low." Sad face emoji. I think I'm gonna hide out at the playoff game tonight, LOL. Then the next day he posted what he did that night. He went to the NBA playoff game between the New York Knicks and the Indiana Pacers in Indiana. And you can see him here in a picture on the floor in a shirt that reads, quote, "Free Diddy," playing into the trolling that 50 Cent has done to Sean Combs over the years, even before Combs was ever accused of what he is on trial for. Now, Combs' trial is expected to last another month at least. He's charged with racketeering, sex trafficking by force, and transportation to engage in prostitution. He has pleaded not guilty. Join us now to talk more about the trial of Sean Diddy Combs and everything that's going on inside the courtroom is Afi Patterson, civil and criminal defense attorney. Thanks for taking the time to be with us. We're focusing on what was a minor moment in the grand scheme of everything we heard in the trial this week, but there's this anecdote that Capricorn Clark told about what related to 50 Cent, but what Diddy allegedly told 50 Cent's manager at MTV during her time of working for Diddy. What did you make of that? Sean Combs saying, "I don't like the back and forth, but I like guns."
I think it goes to the overall case. They've been saying that Diddy was a dangerous guy. If he made a threat, he could back it up. And I do recall reading that she said that his demeanor was very, very serious. And knowing his history, his violent history, knowing about the beef between Biggie and Tupac, I think that it probably frightened her. And I think that just again, her knowing about his violence, his propensity for violence, his behavior with her, his behavior with Cassie, his behavior with other employees, he's just continually in reinforcing that violence. So I think it was a really good moment for the government.
Yeah, it's just, and it seems like there are these little moments along the way where there are some celebrity names that pop up. This case, it was 50
Mhm.
Cent. We heard earlier in the trial, Usher and Neo were at a dinner where Cassie was allegedly assaulted. It was unclear whether they saw that, but it
Mhm.
was said that they were there. As far as the history of 50 Cent and Diddy, do we know how it started? I know that 50 Cent had a diss track, I think around 2006, claiming that
Mhm.
Sean Combs knew who killed Biggie Smalls. But is there a particular incident that happened that made 50 Cent just seem to really start to come at Sean Combs?
As time went on, the shifts became harder to ignore. Associates who were once close began to back away. Collaborators who had long aligned with Diddy quietly distanced themselves. To 50 Cent, it wasn't coincidence, it was a pattern. And in his words, that pattern was built on power, silence, and subtle consequences. Then came the moment that stopped the courtroom cold. 50 described an encounter from the early 2000s, one that had stayed with him for years. According to his testimony, Someone close to Diddy approached him with a private business pitch. There was no paperwork, no official meeting, just a vague proposal framed around the idea of creating exclusive spaces for expression. Curious, 50 asked for more details. But instead of answers, he was met with resistance. The conversation abruptly ended, and nothing more was said, until a few days later. That's when, he said, Diddy confronted him in person. According to 50, the message was short and unmistakable. Forget it. That wasn't meant for you. But what struck him most wasn't the words. It was the delivery. As he recounted the moment, he described the look in Diddy's eyes. Not loud, not aggressive, but cold. A quiet stare that, he said, carried a warning without needing to say more. There was no threat, he told the court. But I knew exactly what it meant. He paused for a moment. The room was silent. No shouting. No tension in his voice. Just one man, recounting a memory with firm clarity. Whether it was viewed as a warning or simply a moment of realization, the weight of his words lingered in the air long after he stepped down from the stand.
New interview recently published by The Hollywood Reporter, the Get Rich or Die Trying rapper isn't mincing words on how he really feels about his arch rival. In the interview, 50 Cent addressed his relationship with Diddy, who faces a number of troubling allegations, including rape, sexual assault, sexual harassment, and sex trafficking over a string of lawsuits. 50 Cent says he's been very vocal about not going to Diddy's now infamous parties, which have been alleged as the site of some of the heinous acts he's been accused of. While referring to Diddy as his old moniker Puffy, 50 Cent said, "I've been very vocal about not going to Puffy parties and doing stuff like that. I've been staying out of that stuff for years. It's an uncomfortable energy connected to it." When asked if someone told 50 Cent if the energy there was off or if he went to something that felt odd, 50 replied, "He asked to take me shopping. I thought that was the weirdest stuff in the world, because that might be something that a man says to a woman." He would go on to say, "From that, I wasn't comfortable around him." 50 Cent would go on to discuss the brutal hotel surveillance video released in May, which showed the Bad Boy founder horrifically attacking his ex-girlfriend Cassie. That incident was mentioned in Cassie's now settled lawsuit against Diddy, in which Diddy allegedly paid $50,000 for the tape. Once that video was made public, Diddy issued a public apology. However, didn't mention Cassie by name, as it's been reported Diddy is no longer able to say her name publicly as a part of their settlement.
I was fucked up. I hit rock bottom. But I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now. I went and I sought out professional help. I had to go into therapy and go into rehab. I had to ask God for his mercy and grace. I'm so sorry. But I'm committed to be a better man each and every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry.
The video was published to Diddy's Instagram, but has since been scrubbed from his page. Diddy's rival 50 Cent had choice words about the brutal video, saying first he denied that even happened, and then the tape comes out, so that means everything that N-word says is a lie. When someone watches that, if they have a daughter and they can imagine her being under those circumstances, that stuff is crazy. Like they let him get away with it. With all the influence and power you have, the person you're with is supposed to be a part of your life, not be forced. 50 Cent has long touted his plans to make a docuseries about his longtime rival. When asked what made 50 want to produce the series, he replied in part, "I'm the only one."
As 50 Cent continued his testimony, the mood in the courtroom grew heavier. His words peeled back layers that few had ever dared to expose. He spoke of hushed conversations with former insiders, artists, assistants, producers, people who once operated within Diddy's inner circle. According to 50, many of them didn't remain out of loyalty. They stayed out of fear. Not the kind that comes with legal threats or headlines, but something quieter, more personal. Something that followed them after the lights went off and the cameras stopped rolling. He described an environment built on unspoken pressure. Careers weren't ended with a statement. They were eroded with whispers, carefully spread rumors, or sudden calls that made opportunities disappear. A place where silence wasn't just expected, it was enforced. One of the most chilling parts of his testimony centered around long-standing rumors, claims that Diddy kept private materials, sensitive recordings, images, documents. 50 made it clear that he never saw any of this alleged material himself. But what struck him was how often these stories came up and how people's expressions would shift the moment they were mentioned. It was like a switch flipped, he said. They didn't even want to speak above a whisper. He recalled seeing artists leave late-night recording sessions, not physically hurt, but visibly shaken. It wasn't bruises, he explained. It was like something inside them had gone dim. And still, almost none of them ever spoke publicly. The silence, he said, was louder than any headline. Then came the moment that shook the courtroom. As 50 laid out his claims, Diddy's composure cracked. He leaned in toward his attorneys, whispered something under his breath, then suddenly slammed his palm against the defense table. The sound echoed across the room. The judge instantly called for order, her gavel striking sharply, but the moment had already landed. All eyes turned to Diddy, his face tight, jaw clenched, lips pressed together. For years, he had been known as the image of cool control. But here, under the weight of testimony, the mask slipped. 50 Cent didn't react. He held his gaze, steady, quiet, unshaken, almost as if he'd been expecting that exact response. Then, shifting from witness to survivor, he spoke from experience. He reflected on being young in the industry, navigating power, influence, and complex figures like Diddy. The hardest part, he said, wasn't the fear. It was the silence. He talked about how people defended Diddy publicly, how friends, collaborators, and even competitors closed ranks around him. Not necessarily because they believed in him, but because they didn't feel safe challenging him. Loyalty turned into silence, he said. And silence turned into protection. And in that protection, he added, the cycle was allowed to continue, unchecked, unchallenged, and unseen.